Amorim being as candid as ever there after his United reached a new low last night. So what does the future look like for Ruben Amorim and Manchester United? Well, I'm delighted to say we're joined now by Joe Smith from the Stretford Paddock to get into all of this. First of all, Joe, thanks so much for joining us. And where's your head at after such a disappointing night last night?
I'm still trying to locate it, to be honest. I don't know. It was just awful, wasn't it? Two poor teams playing bad football, and Tottenham probably just got the look of the green with the goal, didn't they? And that was it, really. Yeah, my head's all over the place, as you could probably tell.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you, mate. I don't blame you at all. And yeah, about that goal, I mean, the goal was indicative of where the clubs are at. Scrappy goal to get the win. I guess on that, Spurs go 1-0 up, and the similarity between Ruben Amorim and Ange Postecoglou is that they're both, quote, wedded to a particular system. But last night Ange showed, I guess, that little bit of flexibility, but Ruben Amorim, that stubbornness. And I guess sort of, how do you feel about Amorim at the minute? Obviously, he's so candid, and from United's fans I speak to, and, I listen to you talk about it as well, Joe, there's an element of that being refreshing, and you like the fact that he's honest about the state of the club, because fans know that the club's in a bad place, and Ruben Amorim's at least being honest about it. But is there a point where you sort of think, why can't you just play 4-4-2, for example, or play a system that might benefit these players to the, whereas sticking to a system to the detriment of a club in a European final?
Yeah, I think there was rotation and flexibility within the system. I think because Amorim's system starts with a three. The formation, should I say, starts with a three.
Yeah.
That it feels like at times that's all people see as his system. Like every three at the back is the same as every other three at the back. So if you don't have four at the back, then basically it's this alien system that even within that system there can be no change, no movement, no sort of differences. We all accept that there are many different four at the back systems. A 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1, and even two different 4-3-3s can look very different. Like yesterday, for instance, look at Amorim. Harry Maguire was playing up front for the last 10 minutes. That's certainly a change in the system. That isn't just sticking with what we did for the first half an hour and never changing it. I think Amorim did adapt, and I think he does adapt quite regularly in games. But because it's, a three at the back, people think that he's really stubborn and, he's not willing to change things. Switching from Mount to Garnacho is a very big change in how you're going to play. But like I said, Maguire up front, that's clearly a change. And I think that, like I said, sometimes because it's not as clear and because there isn't this big change of formation from three at the back to four at the back, people think that Amorim's completely stubborn. But I think that we do see changes, and those changes in the past have helped us win. But obviously, couldn't help us win yesterday.
Yeah, of course. And I guess it's fair to say if you're relying on Harry Maguire going up top, that's indicative of the problems at the club. We understand at talkSPORT that Ruben Amorim is going to be backed by Ineos, backed by the club, particularly in the summer transfer window. Where's your head at with Amorim? Different fans, some fans calling up talkSPORT after the game last night and calling for Amorim to be sacked. I think that he's shown that he's got something about him that can drag Manchester United out of this. And I personally think that listening to him is actually quite refreshing. And he seems like, very intelligent and that he can do something special. Where are you at? Have you lost a little bit of faith because it's been so poor since he took over, or do you believe in what he's trying to do?
I think you have to have lost a little bit of faith. We can't pretend that how I feel now is the same as how I would have felt if we'd have won the Europa League and finished sixth or fifth. Or obviously my faith has been chiseled away at a little bit, and it's maybe thinner in places than I'd like it to be. But I do genuinely believe that he is a good enough manager to bring us out of this. And whether he'll win the Premier League with us one day, I don't know. Maybe not. Probably not, because that seems to be the odds of Manchester United managers. But I think that the bigger problem is the squad and the environment at Manchester United. I don't think Amorim is a terrible manager. I don't think Ten Hag was a terrible manager, or Solskjaer, or Jose, or Louis van Gaal. I think these were all very good managers. Some of them world-class, legendary managers that all looked out of their depth at different times with Manchester United. Obviously, we're at a whole new level now. We're 16th in the league. Might well finish 17th after the weekend. That is unprecedented for Manchester United in the Premier League era. But I don't think that that's just because the manager isn't up to it. I think that the squad doesn't have any goals in it. We saw that last night. Like you mentioned, the fact that Harry Maguire is up front doesn't just, and it wasn't just like, what's he doing? United fans were begging for it for another 20 minutes before he did it. We all think, our best option to score a goal to get us back into a major European final is to put Harry Maguire up front, a bloke who, let's be honest, is I've defended Maguire a lot down the years, but guess what? 3 or 4 goals a season. He's not even like a particularly prolific goal scoring centre back.
Yeah,
He's just a tall guy who's good at winning headers, and that's our best bet. And it was our best bet. You can't blame the manager for your best striker in an emergency situation is Harry Maguire. And then you expect him to, finish in the European places. I just think we need better players.
Yeah, and this is a point I make to, lots of my mates are United fans, and, some of them really feel passionate about Amorim going. And I just think, I said it at the top of the show, the problems at Manchester United transcend Ruben Amorim, and you cannot deny that he has inherited a squad. I mean, I try not to join the pile on with Rasmus Højlund, but he cost £73 million. And if he's your starting striker, God love him, it's not going to be a good season. And so, of course, the next issue on the list for Manchester United is what happens in the summer. Now, there's a lot of talk about getting rid of the deadwood at the club, but I guess the problem and the thing about having deadwood is that it's deadwood for a reason. And so how do you feel about prospects moving forward? There's talk about, the number £100 million being thrown around, but I keep having to remind people £100 million is sometimes not even a player in the current climate. What do you want to happen sort of practically this summer? Who do you want to see go? What type of players or names of players do you want to see come in? And what's your sort of biggest hope for next season?
Yeah, Amorim said himself that we need to be brave. And I think being brave isn't letting Lindelof's contract run out, letting Johnny Evans go on a free, moving on players that never play for us anyway. Christian Eriksen, we won't renew his contract. That's not brave. That's just obvious. If he's talking like that, he means someone that plays regularly for the first team, or multiple players that play regularly for the first team need to go. And I don't know who that'll be. And, certain players like Bruno Fernandes and Kobbie Mainoo, I don't want to see go anywhere. Garnacho, I want to have that kind of love for him that I do for Mainoo and Bruno, but for some reason I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's some of the types of quotes that we saw from him last night, and in the past his demeanor a little bit seemed like he's not quite as, I don't know, in love with things as other players are.
Before games, seemingly, we don't know, we can't read his intentions, but seemingly in protest to the fact he's not started. I mean, his comments after the game, it's difficult for all of us. This season has been, enter expletive. We lost the final. We didn't beat anyone in the Premier League. It's very difficult. I mean, you could argue it's like Amorim. It's very honest, but you're right. There does seem to be something about Garnacho that doesn't quite feel like Manchester United to me. And I'm not a Manchester United fan, but I can understand where you're coming from. I am concerned for you about Kobbie Mainoo, because there's talk that he doesn't feel confident that he fits into Amorim's system. Despite his age, he seems like a mercurial player, and he's come up with these moments. He broke through. But are you worried about his future at the club?
Just quickly on Garnacho before I move on to Mainoo. There was
it.
also a quote in there about how he played all these minutes leading up to the final and then only got 20 minutes, which he didn't understand, and we'll see what happens after the summer. I think, that's the bit where you think, well, you don't need to question the manager's sort of tactics or ideas. I think he's played 57 games this season, Alejandro Garnacho for Man United, and, in most of those, he hasn't been particularly great. He's not alone in that, but I do think that it's understandable that he might not start in a final. On to Mainoo, I'm not too worried, actually. The main thing I'm worried about is that we sell him because he's had a bit of a backward step this season. But I think he's still only 19 years old. I think that we have this expectation that if you come through and you're pretty good or really good like he was last year, that then you just have to play every single game between now and when you retire. And if you don't, then you're terrible and it's all gone wrong and we have to panic. Let him come through a little bit. Let him have a backward step. Let him have an injury season and a new manager, let's not forget, who is probably still trying to work out where he's best. And Cobbie's probably still trying to work out where he fits the system best.
I guess the added risk, Joe, is sort of in the cost-cutting world of Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe. When you've got Kobbie Mainoo, who, all of the money you would receive for him counts towards PSR because he's an academy product. If I was a United fan, that would be the thing that scares me, is that they would be willing to overlook, and we've seen with the redundancies, sort of overlook the heritage of the club and what it stands for in the community and its values a little bit in order to make money from Kobbie Mainoo. That'd be my concern.
Well, yeah, and you know what? If you can get rid of all the players I mentioned whose contracts are running out, if you can get potentially Garnacho, if you can get Højlund, if you can get maybe Casemiro, you get a replacement for all of those, get a replacement for Anthony, for Rashford, for Jadon Sancho, then and maybe Joshua Zirkzee, maybe a couple of the centre-backs as well, then you can worry about Kobbie Mainoo.
Yeah.
You know, and I, like you said, you wouldn't need to. If we can actually get rid of the players who are doing less for Manchester United, worth less on the pitch, not just, in a checkbook than Manchester United, Kobbie Mainoo is so far down that list. Like you said, the only thing that is enticing about letting him go is the profit. But we've got a lot of players, a lot of wages that we can get off the books that can more than fund a big summer transfer window if we can just do a bit of good business, get rid of some difficult players rather than just selling the easy ones. Anyone can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I want to ask as well about next season, Joe, because I've got a feeling that having one game a week, no European football, for where Man United is at the minute, could be a real blessing in disguise and allow Amorim the time. I remember when he first joined the club and he was sort of understandably lamenting at the fact that he'd hardly had any time on the training pitch. Now, that's not necessarily, I guess, shown any fruit this season because it's been awful, but I've got a feeling that could be a real good thing for you, that you can just focus on the Premier League and rebuilding with whatever you do in the summer. What are you hoping for next season?
I do think now we're in this situation, I'm always someone that looks for the positives. And obviously last night, and I still feel absolutely gutted about last night. I'm not over it by any means, but we're here now. So what are the benefits, if there are any, of not being in Europe next season? And that's one that you mentioned. More time to prepare for weekend games, Premier League games, less chance of injury because you're less stretched, you're doing less traveling, you're playing fewer games. And that does kind of need to turn into better performances and better results. I do think that could definitely be a benefit. We've seen Forest this season. I think if you'd have put that squad through Champions League football, they probably wouldn't have, they would have struggled to even stay in the Europa League spots that they're currently in. I think that it's not a secret as well. Look at Newcastle. 2 seasons ago, no European football, finished in the Champions League places. Last season, Champions League football, loads more injuries all of a sudden, finished outside of Europe. This season, back into, no European football, and they're back in the top 4 as it stands. I don't think it's a coincidence that these things happen. And if you pair that with a very good transfer window, more goals in the squad, better players in the squad, there's no reason why United, certainly, let's start with top half and then we'll worry about 5th, 6th or 7th, whatever, reports are coming out of the club. But there should be a marked improvement just from that point of view, like you've mentioned. Less games, more time to prepare, less injuries. That'll help.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for your sake, Joe, I really hope so. Thank you so much for coming on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Cheers, mate. Thanks very much.
Take care, mate. All right, you're listening to the talkSPORT 2 Social with William Hill, who are offering epic price boosts every week until the end of the season. 18 plus speedgambleaware.org. Next up, we're going to get an odds update from William Hill.
On AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.